Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Show presented by Monmouth Park. Last week was a terrific renewal of the TVG Haskell Stakes. The Haskell Day card was a big day at Monmouth Park, but they're not done. In fact, this week they're starting Monday racing, so they're on a Friday through Monday schedule. 2 o'clock weekday post times on Friday and Monday, 12:15 Saturdays and Sundays. And if that's not enough, starting Monday, it's the Monday Mid-Atlantic Pick 4, 2 races from Colonial Downs, 2 races from Monmouth Park. That's got a 15% takeout, 50-cent bet. So starting this week, Monday racing, a new bet, combining races from Colonial Downs and Monmouth Park. Natalie, I know you're going to be all over that Mid-Atlantic Pick 4.
I mean, I do love Colonial. I miss it dearly. That was my home track. So it's always a good time to play that one.
So I'm with Natalie Voss, the editor-in-chief of the Paulick Report, who a lot of people don't know this about you, Natalie, but in your spare time, you love reading court documents. Is that right?
I mean, it's just one of my favorite things to do. I don't have enough to do. So I really love when I get like a 250-page transcript of a deposition. It just like makes my whole day.
Well, I know that's not true that you don't have enough to do, but somehow you find time for that. This week you did a very deep dive, far into the weeds, on a deposition involving Medina Spirit appeal in Kentucky, and a deposition with Dr. George Malin, who runs the testing lab in New York. And we're not sure exactly what his role was, whether he was helping the Bob Baffert Medina Spirit defense, or if he was just an interested observer in the case. What's going on there?
So it seems like, well, so first of all, I should say they're in the deposition phase on this appeal as they prepare to hear the appeal. I think August 22nd, I believe, is the current date for that. It's changed a few times. But they've been going through the process of each side deposing the expected experts for the other side to try to get an idea of what information is going to come out in the hearing so that no one's surprised. So some of the KHRC staff members and stewards have been deposed by the attorneys for Zidane and Baffert, and Malin was presented as being somebody who was presenting information that could be helpful to Zidane and Baffert. So the commission attorney did most of the deposition for him. They couldn't quite decide, or I guess they decided. Malin's assertion is that he is kind of a third party. He was doing some research on this Automax thing on his own, and then he was suddenly asked to do some more analysis of Medina Spirit's urine, but that he's not being paid by Baffert or Zidane to come up with these results. He's just sort of doing it, and he wasn't really that excited to be deposed about it. From what I could tell, there was a lot of back and forth on whether he really has to be deposed, how much information he has to provide about his research to the commission and to even Baffert and Zidane's attorneys. So he's here, he's done some testing. I don't know if he's going to actually testify at the appeal or if he's just providing information that will be presented at the appeal, but that's why they were talking to him, to try to get an idea of what he could tell them about the work that he had done.
So you mentioned the research, and I guess he was trying to replicate the smearing of an ointment, this Automax, that the defense or the Baffert team says led to the betamethasone positive in Medina Spirit. So he tried to replicate that by smearing it on a horse multiple times. I guess there were only 2 horses in the study, and one he actually put it in the horse's mouth.
Yeah, so the way that he explains it, we've heard the attorneys for Baffert and Zidane talk about he's done this research, he's proven that you could get a betamethasone positive from an Automax exposure, and he's proven that he found the components of Automax in Medina Spirit's urine. So he kind of did 2 different things. He did test Medina Spirit's urine, but then, as you mentioned, he started this research project to try to see if the topical product could lead to the detection of its components in a horse's urine. He does not want to provide any significant information about that. He doesn't want to provide printouts of the test results for those 2 horses, nothing, because he wants to be able to publish this stuff in a peer-reviewed journal at some unspecified date. So he's not providing a lot of information about what he did there, but we did learn a little more about those two horse trials in this deposition. Yeah, the one, as you mentioned, he smeared the product in the horse's mouth. I'm not clear whether he also put it on the horse's skin and in the mouth. That was a little bit unclear from the line of questioning. But his interest there, I guess, was determining if you had a horse who had it somewhere on their front legs or chest or something where they might rub their mouth against it and have an oral exposure, could that lead to finding components of the drug in the urine? That's not really been what the story has been here. I don't think anyone's ever suggested that Medina Spirit had any kind of oral exposure to the drug. The skin lesions, by the time we saw a picture of them, were pretty far back on his body. I don't know if he could have reached that to rub his mouth on those if he'd wanted to. Honestly, don't know.
Yeah.
The other horse was the one that he put the product on the horse's skin. He put 1 gram's worth of the product on for 4 days and then took urine samples and says that he found components of the drug in those urine samples. But we really don't know if that mimics the way the drug was given to Medina Spirit, because nobody was measuring out, I'm going to put 1 gram on today. When you're treating a skin condition, you're probably varying it a little bit depending on what you're seeing that day. And you're not weighing out the product as you do that. You're just kind of spot treating what you've got. So I don't know how much we know about how comparable that research environment actually is to what this horse went through. So it seems like the commission's going to ask some questions about that probably in the appeal and say, does your research actually demonstrate that this is possible in this situation, or does your research just demonstrate that this is possible in some situations?
And to be clear, this is preliminary findings, because a peer-reviewed research project takes months or sometimes years for a panel to study the results, to look at the methodology, and determine whether or not the conclusions are fair and accurate. Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, and they also, peer-reviewed publications want to see kind of a minimum amount of samples. And so he was asked about that a little bit too, like, so where are you expecting to maybe publish this? And he says, well, I don't know. Well, do you know when you might be publishing this? Well, I don't know, but I haven't tested enough horses yet, so I can't submit these two as part of a study and write it up and submit it to a journal right now, because they're not gonna let that fly with 2 horses. So he was asked, well, when are you going to do some testing on some others? Well, I don't know. So it hasn't been through much of a review process at this point, and we don't really know when it will be.
And you address this in your article, but why are they even doing this? Baffert has already served 90 days that he was handed by the Kentucky Racing Commission. So what is the purpose of the appeal?
They are focused on the disqualification at this point. They want the horse restored as winner of the Derby. I don't know whether the fine has been paid that was issued to Baffert. I don't know if that's part of what they're currently appealing, or if they're just focused on the disqualification and first redistribution. But I think that's probably the primary motivating factor, especially for the owner. You wouldn't, if you finally won the Derby, you wouldn't really want somebody taking that away from you. So I'm guessing that's the motivation here. If the horse were still alive, I would say that residual stud value would be part of it, but that doesn't apply in the situation. So I think that must be the main motivation.
All right, so let's move from the Medina Spirit case to the ongoing cases in 3 states involving the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Authority. The HPPA is has brought suits in Texas, I believe. There's another suit in Kentucky. Both of those cases were dismissed by the judge. They're being appealed. But the most recent case was filed in Louisiana, and it was not quite the same case, whereas the other 2 were challenging the constitutionality of the federal legislation and HISA itself. This case looks at some of the rules that have been promulgated and whether or not it was done properly according to a federal law and according to the way the FTC, which is the oversight group, does business.
Yeah, it seemed like they were taking issue with quite a number of different things, but I think they had some issues with the definition of covered horses and whether or not that was clear. And then there was, sort of a number of elements of the argument that we've heard directly from horsemen and others before about, this is going to be an undue financial burden on us to pay for this. This was passed without any real contemplation of how this would get paid for. And we believe this is going to put undue burden on us and our ability to operate. And it's going to cause injury to us as a result.
Yeah, so the judge in Louisiana ruled that an injunction to stop the authority from enforcing its rules in Louisiana and West Virginia, the two states that were involved, that injunction was granted. But then there was a phrase at the end of the injunction saying that it's restricted to those two states. It said, and as to all plaintiffs. And the Jockeys Guild is now reading that as saying, well, we're a plaintiff in this case. So it applies to every member of the Jockeys Guild. And apparently the Jockeys Guild leadership and the regional directors were telling all of the jockeys yesterday, you can go back to whatever the rules are in the state where you're riding. You can ignore the HISA rules, 6 strikes, no more than 2 at a time. And but HISA got involved and called all the stewards and said, no, we're enforcing this. So you better make sure the jockeys know that. So it is a little bit confusing, isn't it?
It is, and honestly, I don't know who's right in this situation. I think that each side is equally convinced that they are interpreting it the right way, and I'm not sure how we'll get a resolution to that. I know that the Louisiana Horsemen's Association said the same thing in a statement that they released to the media, that they also think that this applies to their membership wherever their membership is currently running. And of course, I think we had talked about yesterday that a lot of trainers who run at fairgrounds just over the winter, but who are usually other places, are probably members of that organization, just for that one portion of the year. So that could sort of have a ripple impact beyond just the year-round Louisiana people.
Yeah, I talked to a lawyer about that specific clause after the judge wrote that it was restricted to Louisiana and West Virginia, and I asked him, how would you interpret this clause? Does it apply to the Jockeys Guild Incorporated as an entity, or does it apply to all their members? And his answer was quite revealing. He said, it depends on who I'm representing. So I think it's fairly vague, and it will probably take an appeals court judge to add some clarity to it.
Yeah, and I don't know how quickly that's going to happen, but I don't think it's going to be today. So I think that
Right.
throws a lot of uncertainty on how the HISA regulations are going to be imposed between now and then. And the rollout has already been kind of challenging, as far as enforcing the rules that they've already got. So just sort of throwing this one more bit of confusion into the mix is really just going to give everybody a headache, I think, for the next couple months.
Well, and we're coming up to August 1st, which is when the authorities said they would start enforcing the jockeys riding crop equipment rule, which is one of the Ramon Dominguez styled Nerf whips. Some people like to refer to it as the gentle touch, I guess it's called. And the other one are the types of shoes that horses must wear. And that was delayed a month because of supply chain issues. And I'm not sure those have been resolved on that or the riding crop issue.
I haven't heard either way conclusively. I've heard horsemen say that they, as of a couple weeks ago, they still weren't able to get those shoes. And when you think about if most horses racing in the US have to have the shoeing change done, that's going to be a lot of horseshoes. If they kind of already didn't have the supply a month ago, I'm not sure whether I think that's going to have been resolved yet. I suppose there's still time that they could delay that implementation again if necessary, but it's sort of unclear at this point.
Well, I can't resolve the shoeing issue, but I can resolve the riding crop issue. I noticed this in the South American racetracks that I've attended. The jockeys do not have their own crop or whip. When they come out of the jockeys room, there's a little carousel with a dozen whips or 14 whips or whatever, however many horses are in the race. They're all the same. Jockeys take one, they go out to ride the horse, they come back, they put it back. Maybe they're wiped off, they're cleaned or something like that. But there's really no reason that American racing can't do that.
I mean, I think jockeys would probably tell you that depending on the horse they're riding, depending on their own sort of body proportions, there are going to be different lengths and different weights to crops that are going to be more or less convenient for them. I think that probably as a dressage rider, I could just sort of take a generic one, but I'm kind of used to the weight and the feel of the one that I'm used to, and that's going to sort of change the way that I move my arm. That's going to change the way that I balance. And so is it something that somebody could adjust to? Yeah, probably. But I think that they're very used to being able to choose things that make sense for, the length of their arm, the length of their body, depending on how they're moving their arm. I get why they want their own, but I'm not sure if that's going to be a potential solution if the supply chain thing continues to be a problem.
All right, we agree to disagree. Where is this going? What's next?
More court documents for us, I think.
Yeah, the appeals are coming up fairly soon, I think, on the Texas and the Kentucky cases. And if the dismissal is upheld, I assume that they'll try to move it on to the next level and eventually the Supreme Court. So it is we're not anywhere near the final chapter, I don't think.
I don't think so. And we were sort of both skimming over some of the documents in the Texas case, and I can tell you I like translating legalese to the extent that I feel I responsibly can, but this is sort of getting a little far in the weeds for me. So it's going to be one of those things where, like, just let me know where they land on it, because the depth of the arguments here, it's really getting pretty dense. So I don't have any guess how I think that any of these is going to turn out. It's not something that you sometimes kind of know when you're reading simpler briefs, like, there doesn't seem to be the precedent that they say there is, or this seems kind of thin. But this one, I've got no idea. It's a bit beyond me.
All right. Well, when we do get there, I know that you'll interpret it as good as anybody. So appreciate that. Thanks for joining us this week to talk about some of your light summer reading, Natalie. And we want to thank Monmouth Park for their support of the Friday show throughout the 2022 racing season. Don't forget, Monday racing starts this week, and there's the Monday Mid-Atlantic Pick 4. Thanks for joining us on the Friday show. We'll see you next week.